Ken in Calgary, Canada writes to me, Paul, when I first started my audiophile 2-channel journey decades ago, I had been told by my fellow audiophiles that EQ, or tone controls, are, with no better words, evil. Are they? Please let me know your thoughts on tonal controls for both analog and digital implementations. Okay, well, yeah, I came from the same school. We got rid of tone controls because, first off, people tend to abuse them. Years ago, when we had preamps and receivers, and every single one of them had a bass and treble control and a loudness control. And just about everybody I knew, including me, when we first started out, before I became into this audiophile stuff, first thing I did is I cranked up the bass and I cranked up the treble all the way because that just sounded cool. And I lived with that for a long time. Over time, people started explaining to me how that made the curve go like this, and it just ruined any chance of it sounding natural or live. And, so it was almost like quitting smoking. I turned the bass and the treble back on flat, and I put up the stereo, and I'm like, hated it, didn't like it. I had to learn all over again a couple of things. One, how to listen, what to listen for. Two, and this is the big deal, setup. I had never set up my speakers. I had never taken the time, didn't have the knowledge to know that setup is so critical. And as I learned about how to set up speakers, how to make things sound good, how to hook up the right equipment, how to do all of that kind of stuff, all of a sudden, now the opposite happens. Now if you turn the bass and treble, it's mucked up. You don't want to do that. So are they evil? No, it's just their use can be overblown, and I wouldn't want to have bass and treble controls. There's no reason for it anymore. I mean, back in the 50s and the 60s, speakers were so deficient. They hadn't any bass, and few of them had any top end. So you kind of had to give some boost to it. I mean, look at the old Bose 901s. Those suckers didn't even have tweeters, and they certainly had no bass. So you had to add this equalizer that, made like a handlebar mustache and that's how they achieved it. So you kind of had to back then. But now with modern speakers, there's no need for EQ. Okay, so we've covered that. What I will say is many recordings would benefit greatly from the individual application of EQ. A lot of recordings are just deficient. And if you had the ability to have a graphic equalizer that you could adjust specifically for that record or that track, that is a godsend. That really helps. Some digital EQ can help too for rooms because digital EQ is very different than analog EQ. So I'm not a big fan of analog EQ unless, of course, you're doing something like in the recording studio, and we can go into all that later. There are applications for it. So if it's in service of making it sound more real and alive, as if you were closer to the musicians making the recording, then EQ is great. If it's for increasing the thrill content, like I used to do with the bass and treble cranked up, nah, evil. Okay, hope that helps. Thanks for the question. Talk to you tomorrow.